Welcome to Turn 1. We're your host, Thomas.
And Jeremiah.
Today, we are doing a quick look at the 2024 Australian Grand Prix. We're going to go through a little bit of last year, but I want to plug something real quick. If you're an F1 fan and you're interested in buying merch, but it's way too expensive, check out our online merch store. I'll link it in the description, and I'll put up some pictures of the options that we have available. We've got some really cool stuff, and it goes to help support our podcast, so check it out and let us know what you think. But let's get into Australia. A wild ride last year, eh?
3 red flags.
Potentially could have been more red flags, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, people were flying all over the place and not on track.
Was there 2 safety cars in addition to the red flags? Or 1 safety car?
1 safety car that turned into a red flag, and then another 2 red flags.
Okay, so without spending, we could spend probably an hour on last year's race, and I don't know how long our recap was of that race last year, but it was probably pretty good in length. There was a lot to cover. The race starts off pretty tame. You got Max and George battling it out, right? And George runs Max wide a little bit and takes the lead.
Well, technically, Max did it to himself. Max does what he always does. So if you line up with Max off the start of a race, you're getting shoved. And so what he did is right off the bat, shoves George as close to the wall as possible. George is dang near into the grass. And then, of course, Max flies to the outside so that he can line himself up to make the turn. But he goes really far outside, giving George plenty of time to recover, get up the inside, and take the lead.
The same time in the back of the grid, though, Charles Leclerc flies off the track.
Gone. And end of race.
And he's out of the race. And some TikTok videos out there might incorrectly report that as Carlos Sainz, but that was in fact Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
Later on in the race, around lap 6 or whatever, Alex Albon, who was cooking in the top 6 or 7 at the time.
Yes. Qualified 7th or 8th, I think.
Flies off in the rocks and breaks his tire off of his car, and he's out of the race.
Smacks everything into that wall.
He goes like 200 miles an hour into that wall.
Yeah, so much so that he recoils off that wall so hard that he scares who was it, Pierre Gasly?
Yeah.
I think it was Pierre Gasly. Scares Pierre Gasly to death, and Pierre Gasly swerves over to the right to avoid smacking Alex Albon's car, which is backing back up onto the track.
And then it causes like this backup of all the other cars.
Yeah, I don't know what this was because the Alex Albon's car was gone. I don't remember how this happened.
It was odd.
But there was a big backup of cars. I think maybe it was because the red flag just showed up, so everybody was slowing down, and not everybody got the message. Anyway, you've got people like our Haas boy, Kevin Magnussen, creating his own path as he just goes sailing to the left past everybody straight through the gravel.
Like 150 miles an hour over rocks.
Not even an attempt to slow down.
He wasn't losing his grid position.
Everybody else is scuffing up their tires, trying to slam on the brakes at the last second.
So that was red flag 1. And then you go to George Russell a little later on, who catches on fire. He's out of the race.
Yeah, he makes a great pass, and then all of a sudden his car's slowing down, and then he looks like a rocket ship because there's just fuel being dumped on fire out the back of the car.
And then you go... The race from lap like 18 to 50 or whatever is a regular race in Australia, right? Pretty tame, pretty normal. You know, Max is winning. Lewis and Alonso were up there at the top. Sainz kept it in position. You had Sergio Perez climbing the...
Yeah, Sergio, who started from the pits with Valtteri,
he
making his way through the entire pack throughout this entire race.
But then we have chaos ensuing again on lap 52 when Kevin Magnussen smacks the mess out of a wall and his tire goes flying down the track. Like, the tire was going faster than his car was somehow. Bouncing down the track.
You're just watching a tire going around the track at 200 miles an hour with no driver.
So they red flagged the race again. And then, so this is like lap 55, 56, somewhere in there.
I thought it was like, no, you're right, because it was 2 laps before the end of the race.
Yeah, they do a standing restart, and I don't know how to explain turn 1 other than just pure chaos, where you have Carlos Sainz smacking Fernando Alonso doing a 360. You have Lance Stroll running off. You have... who else? There was 2 other cars in the back of the grid that ran off. You have the 2 Alpines colliding with each other. Pierre Gasly cutting off Esteban Ocon.
Somebody pushed Pierre Gasly off. That's what it was.
Yeah.
I want to say Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz were dogfighting for position into that corner, so they both braked really late. Fernando, who was already turned and trying to get out on the exit of the corner,
Pierre locked up, ran off. When he came back on, he cut Esteban off.
yeah, and Carlos, he was trying to do the same thing to make sure that Pierre didn't get the outside, so that's what caused him to smack the back of Fernando Alonso, spinning him. And then, like you said, 2 turns later, Lance Stroll just locks up and flies off. Nobody he was fighting, no rhyme or reason, just right off the track.
So your race finishes under safety car, or not a safety. It's a roll. They just roll through the line basically to end the race, and the race finishes Max, Lewis, Fernando, and Carlos Sainz.
Right.
However, they give Carlos Sainz a 5-second penalty for his contact with Fernando Alonso on that red flag restart. And 5 seconds when you're in a grid funneling through the checkered flag is the difference between finishing 4th and finishing 12th.
No, Ricky, please.
In a race where only 12 cars finished.
Yeah. I mean, you had everybody coming out of this race. Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, the Alpines colliding with each other. Nick de Vries, who he just slapped people. And I mean, we didn't see a lot of him from that season at all, so it was expected. But you had Alex Albon, whose car exploded. You had Kevin Magnussen, who lost a tire. You just utter chaos ensued. But what I remember watching this race live, and one of the things that really bothered me is the fact that Fernando got spun right at the end, because this was when I was on my serious Fernando Alonso hype train phase, and I was really, really wanting that for him, man, because he had the car, and it was a 1-2-3 world champion, world champion, world champion, Max Verstappen, Lewis, and Fernando Alonso. So when he got spun, oh, dude, I was ticked. And so then, of course, they come down with the ruling, and how did they put this? Since they didn't get out of any sectors, they never got out of sector 1.
Right.
They restarted it in the same grid position as the original restart, putting Fernando Alonso back in the 3rd spot.
And putting Lance Stroll back there because they were able to get everybody fixed up except for the Alpines, essentially.
Yeah.
And they put them back in their order and let them roll through.
That was great. I loved it.
So switching gears into kind of the track a little bit, Albert Park is the home to the Australian Grand Prix. Okay.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. It's a beautiful setting.
It's fast.
It's a nice looking track. It's well maintained. They go around a lake, but it is incredibly fast. There's not a lot of heavy braking areas. What, probably turn 13 and 3, kind of it.
Yeah, about.
So there's 16 turns. Where were we seeing a lot of the 11. Overtakes were at 11 and 1.
And the reason why 11 is because realistically, I mean, you have a slight bend at 6, and then from 7, 8, 9, 10, you're just full throttle. And so as they're coming into 11, they're coming in hot. You have guys who are coming off of DRS. You have guys that just got a great slipstream, and they're cruising right behind another guy. Maybe they make the move right at the turn 11. But that's where a lot of the turns happen, and that's where we see a lot of people flying off into the sand pit.
Turns 8 through 11, if you don't have a visual, you might not have a visual of this either, but if you picture the backstretch of Jeddah, that long sweeping DRS zone, very similar to that, where it's flat out, full speed, going around a turn with DRS, and you're coming into an overtaking zone. It's just a lot of action on this track. I'm a fan of it. I don't like racing this track on the video games. It's listed as a very easy track. I disagree with that heavily. But I think in terms of a spectacle, in terms of the ambiance, which I'm big on, Albert Park is pretty awesome.
I mean, the entire track is just high speed and medium speed corners. There's walls hugging each side, kind of like a street circuit-esque, which is, fair because a lot of the track is actual public streets that you would drive on normally.
It's a park that people drive around and picnic and play sports. And
except we're going 200 miles an hour.
Jeez. All right, let's go. Our last thing before we make our predictions. What's the fastest lap data on this track?
So Sergio Perez, well, first of all, it's a mixed bag, right? Because technically it was Michael Schumacher back in the day. However, they've altered the track since then. So as of 2021, which they didn't race, so I guess 2022, with a new setup, their new track layout, it's Sergio Perez last year hitting the fastest lap. He hit a time of 1:20.235, which he did, lap 53, whenever he had fresh tires, low fuel. He comes out there, sets the fastest lap, trying to make his way up the pack.
And it was still
like 3.5, 4.5 seconds slower than Max Verstappen's pole position time.
We're trying to track this like qualifying pace versus race pacing, and I'll be honest, that's more reasonable than some of the other times.
3.5 is way closer than
like
what
we've seen
on
7,
other
8,
tracks.
9-second differences off quali in race time, so 3 seconds isn't that big of a deal. But I think that goes to the track just being a flat out track anyway. Maybe I don't know. There's something to do with that, but it's certainly interesting. Let's wrap up with predictions. Give me your top 3 and then maybe a wild card from somewhere down the field.
Give me Max to win. I'm not
Shocker.
betting against that once this entire season, so I feel like that just goes without saying.
It's hard to it makes no sense to bet against it.
This is where it gets tough because we haven't seen much out of the Mercedes.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a lot out of the Ferraris, and Sergio Perez has come out strong so far this season. Granted, there's only been 2 races, but we've seen good from Sergio. Give me Sergio to take the second spot. I'm not going to stray away from that. Give me the Red Bull 1-2. But for that third spot, give me Lewis Hamilton.
I can see it. I was debating where to put Lewis in my top 3 to 5, and he's going to fall just outside.
Okay.
I'm going to stick on this train until it works. Give me Max Verstappen to win.
Ooh, shocker.
Give me Sergio Perez to come in second.
Okay.
Give me Lando Norris third. I really think McLaren is going to have a year, man. They're right there. They're right there with Mercedes and Ferrari.
The problem is if you took where they were finishing at the end of the season last year to how they've started out this season, it wasn't like they were arguably the second fastest car on the grid at the end of last season.
100%.
And this year, they're really 3 or 4. I mean, Ferrari's just got pace, and Mercedes and McLaren, they're really interchangeable. I mean,
I think though we saw McLaren last year make those really big changes to the car. And I don't know if they've done anything to it yet. I don't know what's going on, but I know right now both Oscar and Lando are super comfortable with the setup of that Mercedes. If they do, what did I say, Mercedes?
Yeah.
McLaren. If they do a similar upgrade package at some point this year to they did last year, and they're the second fastest car, they're going to be way more in the fight this year than they were last year. Because last year they were so far behind, right? Remember halfway through the year?
Yeah, but they didn't bring those upgrades last year until what, Silverstone?
I know, I'm not saying they're doing it yet, but he's got pace. It can happen. The Ferrari struggled here last year. Who knows?
You know, to that,
Aston's not in the way anymore.
To that, though, whenever they did bring that second fastest car on the grid at the end of last season, he was finishing races, 5 seconds behind Max Verstappen?
Yeah.
Who was typically finishing around 20 seconds ahead of everybody.
He got 7 podiums last year.
Yeah, it was pretty dominant performance by Lando. So I could see it if they have a car that matches that track. Because, I mean, last track that we raced at, Saudi Arabia, it seemed like the McLaren was weak.
I've got 2 wild cards for you.
Okay.
Give me Alex Albon in the top 7.
Ooh.
He's quick. He's good at this track as long as he doesn't explode himself.
All right.
2, give me Zhou Guanyu to get points.
No.
Dude, he is far and away better this year than he has been in any previous season. And last season, he had a good race at Australia.
All right, my turn. Give me Nico Hülkenberg to get points. Again, back-to-back races.
That's okay. I can see it.
Okay. Well, then I need to be a little bit more extreme. Give me Lance Stroll to finish in the top 7.
Oh, that's borderline.
You put Alex Albon up there, but not Lance Stroll?
Dude, in Australia, I'd take Albon over Lance Stroll any day of the week for a finishing result. Again, if Alex Albon didn't crash into that wall last year, he's getting a top 6, 7 finish.
10. He would have dropped down.
He would have fought through all that chaos. He would have been 6 or 7.
Okay. I like it.
With Carlos dropping back at the end.
I like it.
Dude. Okay, let us know down in the comments who your top 3 predictions are. Give us a wild card if you want to as well.
Guys, if you think Danny Rick silences all the doubters, comes in 5th to finish off this race, I'm riding with you.
All right, guys, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.